All right, friends, the weather's kind of cold outside today, so I'm going to do one of my favorite things to do when the weather's not real nice. I find a good book, I get myself a nice warm cup of hot chocolate, and I sit in front of a nice cozy fire, and Macy and I kind of cuddle and read a little bit. So today we're going to continue to read in our story, If You Sailed on the Mayflower in 1620. We're going to read about the Pilgrims and how they built their town and what they did at Christmas. Let's go. How did the Pilgrims plan to build their town? The Pilgrims decided to have one street that would go from the shore to the top of the hill. The top of the hill was a good place for their big guns, their cannons. From there, they could see the countryside. They could look out across the sea. The Pilgrims planned to build houses along both sides of their street. They named the street First Street. We have a First Street in Flagstaff. The Pilgrims could not build houses for everyone that year, so they worked out a plan. The men that had no wives or children would move in with families. Some of the smaller families would move in with the larger families. The houses would be crowded, but everyone would have a roof over his head. The land was measured. A plot of land was given to each family. Larger families were given more land than smaller families. Here's the picture. You can see there's the sea, there's their street. They built on both sides and they made sure that they could see. They're up on top of the hill. Let's keep reading. What was the first building in Plymouth? The first house the Pilgrims built was the Common House. At first it was used as a storehouse for tools and as a shelter for the men who were working. Later that year it was used as a church and even a hospital. Guns were kept there too. The men and the boys began to chop down trees. They sawed pine logs to make planks. They split cedar trees to make clapboards for the Common House. Most of the men went back to the Mayflower to sleep. A few stayed on shore to watch over the tools. Many days the weather was so bad the men could not work. Because of the bad weather, it took the Pilgrims 26 days to build the Common House. Right, so they talked about how they made the logs out of other trees. So they used cedar trees and they used pine trees and the different trees that they had to make the siding and the actual wood. They didn't have a lumber yard like we do where you could go to like Home Depot or Homeco and buy the lumber. They had to make it. Did they work every day? From Saturday afternoon until Monday morning, no one did any work, not even cooking. I kind of like that idea. That was the Pilgrims' time to worship God. They prayed, they sang psalms, they listened to William Brewster's long sermons. This made Captain Jones and his crew very angry. Captain Jones wanted to go to work every day. He wanted to help the Pilgrims get settled as fast as possible so he could sail the Mayflower back to England. So they didn't work every day. They had Saturday, Sunday, and Monday that they took off, and then they did their church sermons and their worshiping. The captain didn't like that too much. He wanted to get back to his family in England. How did the Pilgrims spend their first Christmas? They worked. Christmas came on a Monday that year, and Monday was just another working day. The Pilgrims did not believe in having a Christmas holiday, so for the Pilgrim children, there were no Christmas trees, no Christmas stockings, no Christmas presents, and no Christmas songs. But the sailors had a good time. They sang and drank beer. So the Pilgrims didn't celebrate Christmas because that's not something that they believed in. But the sailors did, so they didn't work, but the Pilgrims worked on Christmas that first year. What was one of the biggest problems in Plymouth? Sickness. There was terrible sickness in Plymouth that first year. There were some days in February when only 6 or 7 people were well enough to take care of the ones who were sick. By spring, about half of the Pilgrims and sailors were dead. 3 whole families died during this terrible time. The brave little group of Pilgrims sadly buried their dead. They did not mark the graves in any way. They hoped that no Indians would find out how few Pilgrims were left alive. They were afraid that they would be attacked if they knew. Did the Pilgrims have any medicine? No medicine could cure the terrible sickness, but the Pilgrims had plenty of medicine to cure aches and pains. Plants called herbs were the medicine of the Pilgrims. When spring came, the women planted herbs in their gardens. Suppose you cut yourself. Your mother would make a medicine from a wild daisy. She would mix it with animal fat and smear it on your cut. Suppose you had a headache. Your mother would mix ground up sage with fat and cornmeal. You would have to eat it, even if you hated the taste. Rose leaves and the fruit of the rose, called rose hips, were said to be good for almost anything. Today we know that rose hips have the same vitamins that oranges have. If herbs did not cure you, you would go to Dr. Fuller. Most doctors of that time thought a good way to cure the sickness was to bleed them. Dr. Fuller would cut open a vein in the sick person's arm and let the blood flow out. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I would have want to got sick as a pilgrim, because I don't think I would have want to visit Dr. Fuller. But we do still have a lot of people that use herbs in their medicine today, and there's lots of different types of vitamins and stuff that we can find from plants. All right, friends, we read quite a bit. We learned how they built their first house, being the common house, and how they made a street that they named First Street. We also learned what they did at Christmas time, that they worked not on Saturdays, not on Sundays, not on Mondays, but they worked every other day. And then the Pilgrims worked on Christmas Day. Thanks for reading with me. Hope you enjoyed the reading time.